Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Protect Your Business from Ransomware Attacks, brought to you by Insight Cloud and Data Center Transformation Division. My name is Danielle Moore, Marketing Manager at Insight, and I will be your moderator. Before we begin, I wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. This webcast is designed to be interactive between you and the presenters. The webcast console you are looking at can be completely customized. You can resize or move any of the windows that you have open. If you have questions during the webcast, you can click the Q&A widget at the bottom and submit your question. All questions from this webcast will be captured. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please visit the webcast help guide by clicking on the question mark icon below the presentation window. The help guide covers common technical issues. I would now like to turn this over to our presenter, Jason Radar. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Danielle. Welcome, everyone. We're really excited to have you here today. I'm Jason Rader, and I'm the practice director, national practice director for Insight Security Practice here in the Cloud and Data Center Transformation Division. And with me today is Tunde Odele, who is our head of assessment and testing for that practice here at this in Cloud and Data Center Transformation Division as well. Welcome, Tunde.
Oh, thanks, Jason. Appreciate it. Look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, so the catalyst for kind of this conversation today, ransomware, maybe this is going to be a short session because maybe you're just going to tell us about the silver bullet for dealing with ransomware. Is there a silver bullet?
So, that's a good question. The silver bullet is, as we discussed, you need to have a program. So there is no silver bullet from that perspective, but you kind of have to approach it from having every company is going to have to develop some sort of a program to really address the topic of ransomware. So I know certain companies will indicate that our solution stops ransomware or it does this or that. There really isn't. It's all about having a top to bottom program implemented to really deal with these threats. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
No, I think that's great. I was going to say it's a really big silver bullet. It's like a silver ballistic missile, if you will, because this program, and it's not just, you mentioned companies, it's not just companies, it's not just technology, it's an overall program that really has to kind of be sorted out amongst very individually for different organizations, because it's not just the technology, but the process as well as the way that the people are involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing to also be careful of, I mean, as customers have these conversations, is really each company's blueprint for addressing these issues is going to vary, right? It's going to vary based on the exposures that they face, the specific industry in which they operate. Obviously, some industries are a lot more targeted than others, so that would factor in as well the data sensitivities, the sensitivities of the customers, the types of services they provide. So I think everything kind of has to be weighed in that light, and then, as you indicated, has to be customized to each customer's exposure and dealt with accordingly from that perspective. So yeah, you're exactly right.
So beautiful. And of course, we want to deliver the goods. We're not just going to say, man, it's a giant problem. We want to talk about some things today. We've got like 6 points, basically, that, we sometimes deal with where do you start? We're going to try to hit the 80-20 rule here. And if you do these things or have your arms wrapped around the things we're going to talk about today, we feel like you're going to be the majority of the way there. And some of these things might not be as mature as you'd like, but we'll talk about a couple of different techniques or areas that hopefully will light some folks up and make them feel a little more comfortable about what's going on. That being said, for all of you guys out there in webinar land, we'd love for you guys to interact with us on this session. We've got a question and answer capability, and to prove that we're not just robots here, we'd actually love to interact with the audience that we've got. So as you guys send questions in through the mechanism that you've got, there's a Q&A option built into the console here. Feel free to ask, and we'll try to take those questions as we can. If we can't get to them during the session, we'll try to go back and do those because we can get to them after the session. We'll try to go back and send you those responses if we can. So awesome. So on with the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
When we're talking about, so basically these points, and I'll send the talk about the web location on our website at insightcdct.com, where we've got this document that you produced a little while ago related to this. The number, and not in any particular order, but the first thing that we'll talk about today is, everybody thinks that once we figure out the endpoint strategy for our organization, we're done. So again, no silver bullet, but let's talk about the right endpoint security solution.
Yeah. So as you kind of touched on, the strategy is really the most important thing. That's where you want to start. But in this day and age, I mean, obviously, we're all focused on keeping the lights on and all that good stuff. So the one question I typically get is, okay, I understand I got to have a strategy, but what component of that strategy is most important? And the way I answer that question is really, at the end of the day, whatever your choice of endpoint security solution is really going to be key. The reason I typically say that is most people assume that all endpoint security solutions are made equal. Nothing could be further from the truth. Just in my personal experience.
There's a checkbox in my audit that says, do you have endpoint? And I check that box. I'm done, right?
Well, I wish it were that simple, but I'm glad you touched on that as well, because a lot of times most people use the checkpoint, the compliance mentality to drive, and they use that to drive the security program. And that's a wrong way of really approaching it. Yes, you can check the box, but at the end of the day, if and when you get compromised, and it will happen at some point, your checkbox compliance approach isn't going to save you bacon at the end of the day, right? So one of the things I typically tell customers is you want to pay attention to your choice of endpoint security solution. Now, the question is, obviously, there's a myriad of solutions that are out there. How do I go about this? Well, ask an expert. That's the shortest answer. The same way, I have a car, but I don't know the first thing about cars. I go to a mechanic for that stuff. You gotta find the right folks. You might actually have to do some research, right? Look into anti-malware rating agencies, and there's several of them that are out there. I mean, there's Gartner, there's Forrester, there's NSS Labs, there's Effortas. There's a slew of them that are out there, right? That will, and obviously, I'm not saying take one over the other, but essentially look through all these different virus rating agencies, endpoint security ratings agencies, and you'll find some commonalities around what you should be doing as far as endpoint security is concerned. One of the other things I also try to advise our customers around is, and when you're picking a solution, obviously the immediate concern is dealing with threats at the endpoint, which is all well and good, but you don't want to stop there. In security, the concept is always layered security, right? So let's say, for example, you pick one solution that you've vetted, does a really good job of threat management, whether it be pre-execution, on execution, and post-execution, which is typically how these solutions market themselves. That's all well and good, but there are other things as well that, as part of again, endpoint security strategy, essentially, could be very beneficial. So I'll say, for example, endpoint web content filtering, for example, right? Data loss prevention. These are all things where they could serve as early warning or early indicators that something is going on from a preventative layer. So, and we see more and more endpoint security solutions that are going down this road. So they're starting to evolve beyond just the threat management, threat identification, and all that kind of stuff. And they're starting to add these feature sets on. What I tend to advise customers is that's really how you want to approach this, right? Yes, you want to address threat management, which is great, but then besides that, what else should you be doing? Because at the end of the day, most attackers, when they get into your environment, the first thing they want to do is reconnaissance. If you've got a good solution that can detect, for example, network pings, that's great. Part of what they also want to do at some point is probably exfiltrate data. Well, if your endpoint security solution has built-in DLP, for example, where it is going to control or alert on the exfiltration of data to certain destinations, that's another layer of control. So that's generally how I encourage customers to view the topic of endpoint protection. I mean, definitely do your research. And if you're too busy to do the research, get someone who knows this stuff inside out. That's typically how I go about it.
Now, and I think that's good points. So if I'm reading you right, and I think I am, just going for best of breed, looking at the leaders and visionaries in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, for example, doesn't sound like it's just the go-to move, right? So just going best of breed, because there's, I think a lot of folks forget about they've got a stack related to their technology from a security perspective, how these things integrate, and how, like to your point, how the endpoint protection integrates with the rest of the other things, and how potentially correlated events from endpoint as well as, if I'm seeing something happen on an endpoint and then I see RAR files being dumped somewhere, and then I see them moving out of the organization without being blocked or password protected RAR files leaving the organization. That to me is a pretty clear indicator that, who uses RAR anymore. But that's the kind of the thing that we're talking about, is that it's not that from a strategy on endpoints, it's not that there's the strategy is buy the best one. The strategy is buy the best one for you.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm glad you touched on that, because I actually have a similar scenario going on right now, where a customer is essentially looking at one of these ratings agencies, and they're going to buy the far upright solution, so to speak. And my question to them was, well, okay, that's all well and good, and this is a small medium business, and they're about to drop. They're probably looking to drop a quarter. I'm just going to throw a number out there, about $250,000. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, you could take that $250,000 and you could do a whole lot more than just spend that on an endpoint security solution and get much more better bang for your buck. So to your point, that's always a delicate conversation. And what we try to do is really advise the customer that, look, you don't have to go buy the best solution on the market. Frankly, there is no best solution in the market. The way I see it, to be perfectly candid, there's certain things that you want to make sure that the solution has, right? Again, I mentioned things about its hunting capabilities, its detection capabilities, its response capabilities. But besides that, what else does it bring to the table specifically? You want to look at those. You obviously want to make sure that the solution is effective at the end of the day, and then make your decision based on that. But to your point, I wouldn't say go buy the best tool in the market, because the best tool in the market for a Fortune 500 may not, and it's probably not going to be the best tool for a Fortune 1000 company, because there's all sorts of things that go into. There's ease of use, there's deployment, there's just all sorts of issues that go along with that. To your point,
yeah, user acceptance, all kinds of things, and I think that it's their capabilities that may not have even been enabled on the endpoint protection that they were using to begin with. If we're responding to a particular incident that's occurred, I think definitely it's time to think of your overall program. If your knee-jerk reaction following an event is to go out and buy a better technology, it's probably a time to talk to some folks who know how to bring all this stuff together from a program perspective. Absolutely. And to the point that you made, again, I'm just going off of experience. A customer that we had recommended product A for about 3 years ago, all of a sudden, it was never rolled out properly. They get a malware infection or whatever. Long story short, the systems that had the solution were fine. The systems that didn't have the solutions was really the systems that got corrupted. And pretty much they're looking to throw everything out, which is pretty wrong-headed as far as I'm concerned. So again, it's always a delicate conversation that we try to have with the customer around. My feeling is always, if you've got a good product, are you properly leveraging that product to begin with? I tend to start there and not just throw out the baby with the bathwater, quote unquote. So. Yeah, I get it. And we totally understand. Tunde and I have been doing this for a really long time, right? It's really difficult to walk into an environment and tell them, oh, well, all you got to do is deploy this thing properly, right? We know that there's a lot of politics and a lot of user acceptance and a lot of things that go on. So it certainly isn't as easy as that. But the point is it's got to be something that it's not finished until you've done it the way that you plan to do it, right? Have a roadmap, have a pilot group, and it's more than just the tech. I think that's a mistake a lot of IT or security teams kind of make, is that they only focus on the technology and the rollout. Hey, done, checkbox. It's out there, but they're forgetting about the way that they should have partnered with the business units and the user base so that they could make sure that they understand that what this is doing and that they can help overall from a security posture perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the final point I'll make on that is, again, most of these solutions, if you notice, a lot of these solutions now have managed services tied to them for very good reason. Because one of the things that we've seen is customers roll out the product, it's not configured properly, not properly rolled out, not properly configured. So at the end of the day, I tell most of our customers, I mean, if you're going to roll out a solution like that that's going to be critical to your security program, just get managed services with it. I mean, get professional services to make sure, is it going to cost a little more? Yes, it will. Is it going to pay, if it's going to pay for itself down the road? Absolutely it will, based on the payouts that we've seen customers have to shell out based on threats and compromises that have come to light. So that's the other thing. Again, just get whatever solution, make sure you get proper managed services with it. Make sure you get deployment services with it to make sure it's rolled out properly. That's the other thing I'll lay out there.
And I think one of the reasons managed services works for a lot of people is because usually built into that managed service, there's some type of health check that happens periodically. And Absolutely. You don't have to have a managed service in order to do a health check on your environment. You can either call in a third party or you can do it yourself. But I think that's where a lot of people, well, we haven't heard anything, so we're not going to mess with it, right? But it's that health check. Is this actually performing the level? Is it installed where we think it is? Is it performing the way that we expect it to? That whole know thyself thing is a really important aspect to security. You can't just, if nothing's happening, then everything must be going great. It's probably a bad strategy. Yep,
absolutely. And again, to add to that, generally you'll see the term managed breach and response services. I mean, some companies will call it managed services, or some will call it managed threat response or managed breach and threat response, whatever it's called. At the end of the day, you've got a team of experts, obviously, who are supporting the product on the back end, who are really looking at the alerts. I mean, generally the way most of these services work, they're doing weekly triage calls with you, weekly status update calls with you and that kind of stuff. But the most important thing is they're really monitoring the consoles, which most IT guys really don't have the time for, to be perfectly candid. But they're constantly watching the
smaller shops don't have the bandwidth.
Yeah. And exactly right. The smaller shops really don't have the kind of bandwidth. So it really pays for itself as far as that proactive engagement is concerned, where, you've got some sort of an indicator of the threat, you can rest assured that you've got folks on the back end that can literally jump on it. And then in some cases where you do have an incident, maybe it's not related to your endpoint security solution, a lot of these companies will also provide call it level 1 forensics assessment activities as well that can support a broader forensics initiative as well, which can really save you a pretty penny at that point. Yeah.
And I'm going to advance the slide to the next section in just 1 second. But I think an interesting point you brought up that I think is worth mentioning is that some people call it breach response. Some people call it incident response. There's a lot of terms that are out there. You need to make sure apples to apples, you're getting what you expect if you're just looking at the cost of those things.
Yes. Absolutely.
So kind of less on a technology per se, because we're talking about a very specific technology here. But your strategy number 2, you talk about monitoring Active Directory changes, especially group policies. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've seen over the years is Active Directory has always been treated as an IT asset, which, in my opinion, was probably the biggest mistake a lot of companies made. If you look at most environments, once Active Directory stood up, domains are set up, Active Directory force is set up and all that good stuff, systems joined, okay, pretty much it's IT ops problem at that point. And what they forget is, in this day and age, a lot of the attackers are pretty much leveraging Active Directory as their primary delivery mechanism. Since we wrote the white paper that was posted that you referenced, we've had to do, I think, about 3 other engagements essentially. And in every single engagement, the primary delivery mechanism was Active Directory. I mean, it's usually the same. The attackers go in, they compromise whatever system, they find their way, they scrape credentials out of memory, they find their way over to a domain controller, they put in a group policy to deploy a malicious script, and pretty much whenever that script is set to explode, everybody comes in typically on a Thursday, on a Friday morning, and all hell's broken loose. So, and the other thing to note as well is Active Directory is probably the most critical asset any company has. But when most companies are doing their, whether it's called a asset prioritization or business impact analysis, it really doesn't get that level of attention. I tend to see that a whole lot. But then the problem is, without your Active Directory, or if it's compromised to a certain point, I mean, there goes the keys to the kingdom, pretty much. It really doesn't matter what you do at the endpoint or at the server. If I own your Active Directory, I pretty much own the entire environment. So one of the things that we try to educate our customers about is you really need to start imbibing some sort of Active Directory security program. What does that mean? There's two parts to that. The first part is actually making sure that you're hardening Active Directory, right? Most IT guys really don't get into that world. The good thing about Active Directory is it's actually full. It's got a lot of really cool stuff you could do, but most people never deal with it. The other thing that I would use to support that argument is, and obviously we do a lot of security testing. Most of the time, and again, this is actually supported by a study I saw from Rapid7, which is one of the companies that do vulnerability management out there. If we look at the top 4 or 5 vulnerabilities that we typically see in every environment, every single one of them can be remediated, or for the most part is remediated by getting in place the right group policies. But most companies never do it, and that's the problem. So you always want to start with some sort of a hardening, right? And there's a plethora of resources out there that really go into how you can do it. If you don't have the time to do it, which again, most smaller shops don't, then get an Active Directory expert to help you do that, because they're very easy to put in place. You only have to do it once. You really don't have to mess with it once you're done with it. Yeah. So that's as far as the hardening part is concerned. The other part of it is monitoring. Monitoring is also critical because, again, from an attacker perspective, once your environment is compromised, any kind of rogue or suspicious Active Directory modifications, changes, provisioning of new scripts, provisioning of new accounts, those sorts of things, they are very good early warning indicators that you've got an active compromise going on. And the sooner you can jump on those, the better your chances are really nipping it in the bud at that point. So that's where that came from, pretty much.
No, I love it. I think, one of the things that Active Directory is kind of, what we're talking about here, the vulnerability is the capability of Active Directory and all the cool stuff you can do with it. And it's just like that in operating systems. I mean, the trick with an attacker is they want to misuse the technology, right? Exactly. It's not in their best interest to try to leverage, bring some technology in that they can use. They want to misuse the technology that you've got. So they get an entry point, and then they harvest those credentials locally. And again, local admin rights. Everybody should not be a local, or certainly there shouldn't be a local admin for all of your organization that's the same. Then that lateral movement takes place, and then worst case, they hit a domain controller, and boom, it's game on for forever.
And to that point, and you mentioned those basic hardening things that we should be doing, right? Like, again, I can't tell you how many times we still see environments where local users have admin rights. That's just a bad idea through and through. For whatever reason. That should never even be done, but there's always that. There's the issue of strong password authentication. Again, in this day and age, still an issue specifically. But again, at the end of the day, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of enforcement hardening that really can be done with an Active Directory. As long as it's properly secured, in my opinion, generally, you significantly increase the level of effort the attacker is going to have to go through to kind of compromise your environment by just paying attention to that one thing. The other thing I could say to that is, and obviously we do a lot of security assessments. Some of the companies that we've had the toughest challenge breaking into, where we really literally couldn't break into anything, they all had one thing in common. I mean, their Active Directory implementation was very solid. I mean, they had some really solid group policies and monitoring in place. So again, it's high up there for a reason, and there's plenty of white paper as well that's out there that kind of supports that fact that you really should pay attention to your Active Directory, not just as an IT operations resource, but as a core component of your security tool. Absolutely.
Fantastic. I'm moving on to our next strategy, which is implement a workstation isolation strategy. Yeah. What are we talking about here? Because it sounds like, based on what's going on, I'm in a workstation isolation strategy working from home these days. Is that the same thing?
Yeah. Well, close. Yeah, it's actually the same concept, right? You're working from home. You're practically isolated. But the concept here is more from a traditional networking environment, right? You've got your networks. You've got pretty much every other workstation implemented, network IPs and all that kind of stuff. Everyone's talking to servers. The problem is most entities, their default posture is to have workstations be able to talk to everything. Sometimes they might say, well, we want to restrict what services the workstations can talk to on the server backend, which is fine, but they really don't prohibit workstations from being able to talk to each other. The problem with that is, if you look at it from an attacker perspective, when you are going to get compromised, 50 workstations on the same network aren't going to get compromised at the same time. It's going to start with patient 0. And typically what happens at that point is patient 0 is now going to be looking at, okay, what systems are close by? Can I move laterally? And that's where lateral propagation begins. If you can remove that vulnerability, again, the name of the game here isn't perfect security, but it is enough security. If you remove that exposure of being able to move laterally, and the way there's a lot of inexpensive ways to do that. I mean, host-based firewalls, or even a lot of endpoint security solutions have firewalls as well. Specifically, I mean, you could do stuff at the switches as well. But long story short, if you can remove that gap where, okay, even if I compromise patient 0, I can't compromise anyone else, any other workstation. My only choice is to go after servers. It increases the odds that, again, hopefully you are monitoring your servers and all that kind of stuff. It's going to increase the odds that attacker is going to get quickly identified. And I say increase the odds because at the end of the day, are you going to be able to absolutely stop attackers from getting into your environment? Absolutely not. And there's plenty of data out there to show that fact. But can you, the name of the game here is not to really, I mean, obviously we want to make it hard for them to get in. That's true. But then once they're in, though, we want to make it very easy to quickly detect that they're in. And this is one of the ways by which you do that. So that's where that whole workstation isolation strategy comes from. I mean, it's been around for ages and ages, but again, most companies never really implemented. And it's one of the, in my opinion, one of the low-cost security controls that can, I mean, you virtually have the solution in place. It's just a matter of planning and architecting and turning it on, regardless of whatever operating system you're on, turn it on, and it can really prove some benefits as far as hardening your environments. So that's really where that came from. Very viable strategy. Again, that's why we see most of the endpoint security solutions are now include as part of their core component the ability to locally manage either the host-based firewall, or they're going to drop in their own firewall module as part of it as well. So that's where that's coming from.
Yeah, I love that. We had talked about before that, clients shouldn't be servers and servers shouldn't be clients. If you see web activity, web browser activity coming from your servers, there probably is something that's not going on. So it's easy from a monitoring perspective. If you see that type of activity going on between your clients or your workstations, or you see server-based resources that are browsing the internet, that should be an indicator that something needs to be checked out there. Again, there's always exceptions. I mean, that's why these workstation isolation strategies aren't implemented by default, and especially depending on which flavor you use. There's the Windows side and there's the Linux side, and they have different kind of mechanisms or approaches to this stuff. But you're using operating systems that have a lot of capabilities, like we talked about, and they don't want to immediately just shut those things off because that affects usability in a lot of cases, especially on client machines. So that's why it's enabled. But a lot of people just don't realize what they're exposing themselves to until they realize they've had a significant exposure.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you're exactly right. And again, I mean, if you look at something as simple as workstation isolation coupled with some of the other stuff that we've got out there. I mean, one of the experiments I'm doing right now, not saying anyone should try this, but in my malware lab, for example, I've got a virtual machine that's directly exposed on the web. It's hardened. I mean, there's no firewall, no physical firewall or anything like that specifically, but it's got its host space firewall turned on. It's got just the basic ports that I have open pretty much. And that thing is still humming along. I mean, you can see people banging away at it, but it's not going to go anywhere. So that's, at the end of the day, again, workstation isolation kind of goes hand in hand with Active Directory, because generally most companies that'll implement that will leverage some sort of enterprise group policy to get that implemented. And to the point that you raised about how do you address those exceptions for stuff that's going to be needed, then this is all in the planning, right? Generally, the idea is workstations are talking to servers. Workstations aren't talking to workstations for any reason whatsoever. So most of the time in your average environment, there's really never going to be a need for any kind of inbound communication initiated into a workstation. That's always a bad idea. But for the general operations, for general operability for these workstations, they just need the ability to talk out. And that's pretty much it. So at the end of the day, like everything else in life, planning. You just got to plan it, do your proof of concept, make sure it's fine-tuned to your environment, and pretty much just let it rip. And it is a very, very effective security strategy for sure.
Awesome. So bringing up strategy number 4 now. Implement a vulnerability management program. So we're not talking about a tool here, are we, or are we?
So it's yes and no, right? So obviously the underpinnings of the program is going to be the tool, right? Because at the end of the day, nobody, at least humanly possible, has the time to go research every vulnerability that's out there, how to prioritize it. It's just a wealth of information out there that it's impractical for anyone trying to, again, quote unquote, keep the lights on to be able to do that kind of stuff.
If they're doing that, they have a really sad life.
Yeah, absolutely. I can assure you. So the idea here is, obviously, you want to start with a program. And when I mean a program, what exactly are you trying to achieve? Now, what I typically advise customers is there's all sorts of standards that are out there that you could leverage, right? I mean, there's ISO, there's NIST, there's COBIT, there's all sorts of standards if you're looking for where to start. But at the end of the day, the intent is you certainly want to get some sort of initially get some sort of automated solution into your environment that's scanning your environment so you have visibility. Visibility is the first important thing here. What kind of vulnerabilities do you have in your environment? Are they, what types of vulnerabilities are they? Are they configuration related? Are they patch related? OS related? What are they? And then prioritize those vulnerabilities, right? What levels of severity do they have? Because you're not going to be able to fix every single vulnerability, and that's not the intent in security. The intent here is really to address the most critical vulnerabilities that you have. But if you don't know what vulnerabilities you have, you really can't fix anything at this point. So it starts with, again, obviously you want to develop a program. What assets are we going to be scanning? And that's the other thing that needs to be determined as well. Do you want to scan the entire environment, or do you want to just focus on your crown jewels? Again, every business is different. The idea is, my recommendation is always you want to scan everything. Because you could say we're only going to focus on our crown jewels. That probably might not be patient zero for any kind of attack that you might experience. So I generally recommend, if it's possible, scan everything. So you kind of have a broad picture of what your vulnerability posture looks like. And then secondly, obviously, this is where, based on asset importance, right, the importance of the asset in question to the business, that should drive your remediation. Because again, you don't want to just go fixing everything for fixing everything's sake. You want to focus your resources. Where do I start? Obviously, if Exchange, for example, is your most critical asset, then that's probably where you want to start. You're going to want to deal with the most critical vulnerabilities that pertain to that system. So that's really how your vulnerability management program starts. And then obviously you're going to need an automated tool to do that. I mean, there's a lot of really good tools that are out there, but generally you want to make sure that you're doing active scanning. I mean, active scanning typically means you would have some sort of a sensor deployed in your environment that's probing away in your network. One thing I always recommend is if you are going to be doing active scanning, make sure it is credentialed, meaning that the scanner is actually leveraging domain admin credentials to scan all your assets so that you can scan those assets through and through versus just scanning at the network layer. You'll get more visibility as far as vulnerabilities are concerned from that, with that approach. You also want to be doing stuff like passive scanning as well, because there's certain things that active vulnerability scanning won't pick up. Some of it will include things like devices, especially in the IoT world, right? There are going to be devices there's going to be devices that you can't scan. I mean, you scan them, they're going to go down. A lot of IoT devices are notorious for that. Legacy systems also very notorious for that. For those kinds of systems, you're going to have to do some sort of passive vulnerability scanning. So again, you want to make sure that whatever solution you're using has that capability. And then the last piece of the puzzle is really going to be something for those remote workers. I mean, right now, we're all work from home at this point. Any kind of on-premise solution that was deployed is probably useless at this point, unless you want to scan across VPNs, which I would not recommend at all. So that's where agent-based vulnerability scanning comes in, right? So ahead of time, you want to make sure that you've deployed, and again, most of the solutions out there have this capability. You've deployed agents to those mobile systems, essentially. That way, whether the system's on-prem, off-prem, wherever it is, you continuously have that visibility as far as vulnerability data is concerned. And then as far as, so with that strategy in mind, the question then becomes, well, how do I go about it, right? So option A is to go with a standalone vulnerability management solution. And that's one, again, like I said, there's a lot of solutions the plays that are out there. Or option B is, again, going back to that endpoint security strategy. There's quite a few endpoint security solutions that now have the ability to do vulnerability scans. Now, one caveat I always state when I get into discussion is the vulnerability, the level of vulnerability scanning that these solutions are able to do is never going to be as in-depth as what these core traditional vulnerability management solutions are able to do. It's not even going to be close, but it's a start. There's certain things that they typically will look for. So things like patches, any kind of some minor configuration issues, whether it be systems with blank passwords, local admin enabled. There's certain things that they bring to the table. So it's a good start. So at the end of the day, you could start, obviously the recommendation is you're going to do vulnerability management. You want to start with option one. You want to get a proper vulnerability management tool, make sure it's implemented properly. If you don't have the appetite for option A, maybe that criteria also feeds into your selection of an endpoint security solution, where, okay, whatever endpoint security solution you're using also has the ability to scan the endpoints for vulnerability. So that's generally how I would approach that. Sure.
Awesome. You said some stuff that I want to kind of talk about. You mentioned kind of crown jewels. And, I think that crown jewels would mean that people actually know what their crown jewels are, which some folks don't even know that. But you also talked about scanning everything, right? I think a lot of folks, every time I've done something we in cloud and data center transformation, we do a lot of data center stuff, right? Now, it's very routine for us to go into a client and talk to them about what assets they have that they're concerned about moving, either into the cloud or into another data center, and they'll estimate typically thousands less than they actually have. I mean, it's not even close. Either from an application perspective, there are hundreds of applications that they didn't realize they were running, or even from an asset perspective, sometimes there's thousands of assets that they didn't realize because maybe who knows, decommissioned and they got put in for other stuff, or who knows. But it's one of those things where I think why you should maybe scan everything to begin with is to know what you got, because a lot of folks aren't even aware of what's out there. And I think one of the, the prime thing, what I expect as a business leader that a vulnerability management program is going to let me know is what I'm exposed to. So I remember when Heartbleed came out, and the first thing that the CIO asked me is, how exposed are we? And we needed to be able to tell how, where we were using those types of SSL, the communication stuff that was affected by that particular vulnerability, and how to deal with it. And so it was easy for us to communicate back and say, well, on these machines and these machines, which Apache is coming out from, whoever vendor, this, and we're going to do this by here, but these are not patchable, and this is going to be our exposure at this point.
Exactly.
That's where it becomes a real business conversation, as opposed to just, when are you going to get to 100% managed vulnerabilities, which is a silly thing, actually.
Yeah, and I'm glad you touched on the visibility question, and even tied it back to asset management, because one of the things, obviously, that we didn't touch in this particular report is asset management. But most asset management solutions, at least the enterprise ones, have the ability to actually integrate with most of these vulnerability scanning solutions for a very good reason. To the point that you made, right? But by nature, these vulnerability management solutions, for them to do their job most effectively, they have to know everything that's on the network. So there's actually quite a few customers that will use their vulnerability management solution as a true indicator of how many assets, what assets or what applications they've actually got within the environment, and they will feed that information into whatever ITSM solution they might be using, or whatever asset management solution that they might be using. So yeah, that visibility, it does give you a lot of visibility, especially for those devices that are off-prem. Again, IoT is another big one, because generally you can't install agents or anything like that on most IoT systems. So that's where, again, that network visibility comes to play. So vulnerability management tools generally have a lot more secondary use cases that are very beneficial to the business beyond just their primary goal of identifying vulnerabilities. They really can start to shed light on, okay, which assets are out there, which assets are really your crown jewels, and those sorts of things, and how best to secure them, obviously.
No, that's good. And, kind of back to our topic for today is from a ransomware perspective. I think you brought up a really great point in that there are, on the endpoint protection products that we've got out there, there's a level of, vulnerability management that exists on those. And certainly for folks who haven't invested in a product yet, leveraging those capabilities is an easy first step from at least a capital investment perspective, because you already got that capability there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, in this day and age, especially with the highly mobile workforce that we have, generally, most companies, when they start vulnerability management, they start with just an on-premise sensor, but they were never really prepared for the mobile workforce that we have to deal with in this day and age. So that's where that second option, again, we're going to see more and more solution endpoint security vendors start to go down that route, because if you look at it, a lot of them are heavy on the protection side. Obviously, endpoint detection and response, that's the name of the game. But at some point, they want to be proactive, and in order to really achieve that level of proactiveness that they're looking for, that's where you're going to start to see more and more companies, more and more solutions start to proactively scan for vulnerabilities on the endpoint and provide some sort of automated capabilities for the systems admin to remediate these systems directly from the cloud, for that matter. So I would expect that, again, the march has already started down that road. Some of the big names, as far as endpoint security solutions, are already down that road, and it's only going to grow as these solutions begin to continue to improve, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about these things like they've been around forever, but I mean, they haven't. I mean, and we only got to the point to where respected, like PCI has only just been, you only accepted these in exchange for like antivirus that used to be the requirement. So, I mean, we're not 10 years into this by any means. We're barely 4 or 5. So it's one of those things where I think that as that matures, because, we all know, and you get the developers that push back when you try to put too many agents on their machine and they're freaking out about productivity and those kinds of things. But I think as somebody's already got pristine access and can read memory and those things like the agents that these guys push out with the endpoint protection, it's a natural to be able to hook into the other stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm glad you also touched on the real estate issue that most IT admins are concerned about. I mean, having multiple agents on the endpoint, and that. Well, yes, it is a concern, but generally in this day and age, just based on what I've seen, the maturity of these products, you can even have a standalone solution, and you really won't have that much of an issue because it's not like you're running two endpoint security solutions on the same machine at the same time. They really, excuse me. They're doing different things at this point, so it's nothing to be concerned about as far as I'm concerned. Again, it's really the choice of tools, right? The strategy. You want a standalone solution or endpoint security. So,
yeah, I agree. I think that they've definitely gotten more mature with the way that they're writing the code that's residing on the endpoints. It's not as bloated as it used to be back when we first kicked this stuff off.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So something that is near and dear to, I think, both of our hearts because of the level of security that it can actually implement, MFA, multi-factor authentication.
Yep. So
is it good?
So, and the reason I laugh is, I mean, how long have we been talking about MFA? I mean, MFA has been what, 5, 6 years, maybe more out there, and it's still, it still amazes me when we look at environments, especially cloud-based customers that have deployed solutions or services in the cloud. There's no MFA at all. And if we look at, I think it was last year, one of the things that we noticed is a spate of data breaches that we had to respond to. A lot of them were actually tied to, again, SaaS-based solutions that were compromised. In this day and age, one of the things that I think what we tell most of our customers is, if you are relying on just username and passwords, I can guarantee you that some password somewhere that you've used and your credentials reside somewhere in some dictionary somewhere in the black market, guaranteed. So usernames and passwords alone aren't going to cut it because you've got a lot of these automated bots that are out there that are just doing all sorts of password spraying attacks across major sites that are out there, seeing what they can log on to and all that kind of stuff. The other problem is, if you look at it, most users are working from home right now. Generally, most users don't have that kind of enterprise level security that we've implemented within our offices. And guess what? If they're running some sort of a memory scraping malware on their home computer that they're totally oblivious to, guess what? They just got a copy of those credentials. So especially with the remote workforce scenario, work from home that we're dealing with, MFA is just super, super, super critical. And generally, by far, most SaaS solutions that are out there already have that capability. So one of the things that we typically recommend is, as a general rule of thumb, right? If it is cloud-based, you certainly want to be doing MFA for everybody, no exceptions. And you're going to get the pockets of a resistance that MFA is annoying or inconvenient. The fact of the matter is, if you're doing any kind of transaction on the web, banking, I mean, most banks have already moved to it. A good portion of the email providers have already moved to it. So the fact of the matter is, the user acceptance is already there, because I can guarantee you that your end users are using MFA in some way, shape, or form. But as far as the business is concerned, again, crown jewels, being in the cloud, if you don't have MFA there, you're just inviting disaster, in my opinion. And it's literally what's going to happen. So from a SaaS-based perspective, anything externally facing, I mean, I'm talking about email, SSL VPN, remote access VPN, you definitely want to be doing MFA. If it's internal, that's always a different story. Again, obviously, if you can do MFA across the board internally, that would be great. That would be the ideal. But at a minimum, you certainly want to be doing MFA for sensitive accounts, right? Whether it be administrative type accounts. Generally, any account that's got administrative privileges, you certainly want to be doing MFA for at a minimum. And then high value targets as well internally. I'm talking about CEOs, CFOs. I mean, we see CFO accounts get compromised all the time. Those kinds of high value targets essentially want to make sure that you're doing MFA for as well. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and you could do conditional access or step-up authentication. It doesn't always have to be that multi-factor authentication each time. Yeah. It's gotten a lot. If you haven't taken a look at it in a while, the technology's gotten prolific and advanced to the point to where it's a lot easily more accepted from users. And to your point, everybody's used to doing something like that these days. It's not every single, if I'm consistently connecting from my home to my bank and it's the same device and it's the same IP address and those kinds of things, it's not every time. But definitely if I go to Paris and I try to log into my bank, it's going to say, nope, we're going to text you before we're going to let you have access. Those are the kinds of things that are normal.
Yeah, and to that point, the other thing I would strongly recommend as well is, again, having some sort of a password management solution. Certainly, I would strongly recommend that as well. In this day and age, again, gone are the days where you want to create that 8-character password and that's going to be enough. There's a lot of free tools out there for password management that individuals can use. I use the same thing as well for all my accounts. But even with that, right? I mean, I've got unique passwords that I've generated for all the different accounts. That's not absolute security, right? I'll give you an example. Last night I was working and all of a sudden I saw a text come to my phone for an authentication code. I was like, okay, I'm not trying to authenticate to anything.
Doesn't make you feel uneasy, does it?
Exactly. So, and if you can look at it, here I am. I'm very careful with my credentials and stuff. I don't manually set credentials or anything like that. Everything is random, but somewhere, and obviously I won't go into where at this point because I figured out where it was. But somewhere, again, someone was able to scrape some credentials, either by virtue of this entity being breached or what. But those credentials ended up somewhere, and all of a sudden, something is trying to authenticate using those credentials. Yep. So that's where, again, MFA becomes critical because it can also serve as an early warning system. In this scenario, I wasn't aware anything was going on, but when I saw the text, that's where I figured, okay, something's really bad going on here. And then I went hunting and figured out what the problem was. So you certainly want to do that. Make sure MFA is enabled if you can for the entire user base. The other caveat that I would put out there is some MFA approaches are much more dangerous than others. I do want to put that out there. So any kind of push notification that requires the users to just hit approve or reject, I typically recommend against that. The reason is, and we've seen customers get burned where an account is compromised, and all of a sudden, a user who's knee-deep in working, they get a prompt saying approve or deny, and they assume it's coming from them. Just hit approve, and they're on their merry way. Guess what? They just give the attackers access to their email or whatever. So I typically recommend, obviously, at a minimum, obviously, you certainly want to do any solutions that's generating one-time tokens that'll require the user to manual activity from the user to type that code back in, just as a form of validation. And obviously, everyone's used to the whole SMS texting. And again, it's not perfect, but it's great. It's much, much better than the alternative. So I did want to put that caveat out there because we see that most solutions have that push notification capability. And unfortunately, we've seen some customers get burned by that.
Oh, thanks. So for you guys out there, we're approaching pretty much the top of the hour, and we wanted you guys, we haven't had a lot of interaction, so if you're holding the question to the end, don't hold it. Fire it out. We've got one more strategy to talk about before we're done, and Tunde, to that point, the obvious, make regular offline backups.
Yeah, absolutely. So backups, again, as we've always said, most security folks will tell you it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you get compromised. So backups are just super, super important. But at the end of the day, again, one of the things that we've seen with most customers is having backups and not properly securing your backups. There are multiple instances now where the attackers will actually go in and actually destroy your backups. Because obviously, if your backups are good, then yeah, you're just going to recover and on your merry way. And again, I won't go into names at this point, but regardless of the solution that you're using, might be top of the line, but you do want to make sure that, first of all, access to your backup infrastructure is very segmented, number one. Number two is you want to make sure that you've got offline copies of those backups. Super, super important. Offline meaning they're not addressable, because like I said, again, the attackers are going to be, the average dual time for attackers in most environments, by all accounts, is over 190 days. That 190 days, they are doing their reconnaissance. They are figuring out either conducting some sort of a data exfiltration, planning what systems they're going to encrypt. But one of the things they are going to be looking for as well is where your backup destinations are. So you want to make sure that anyone who's got that role of privilege, those accounts or those systems, those critical systems, it's possible to segment them. Definitely want to have those segmented. You certainly want to have those offsite copies be truly offsite, where even if an environment was to be compromised, they can't jump into that offsite environment. And then testing. That's the other thing. Very few companies really pay attention to testing their backup and recovery to make sure that the integrity of these things are sound. The last place you want to be hoping and praying that your backups are sound is when you're trying to recover from a disaster. And unfortunately, we see that time and time again. So backups are, again, super important. They're going to be the last line of defense when all else fails. And it typically does for most customers at a certain point. So that's why, again, we shouldn't treat backups as, again, just another IT operations thing. They are a critical piece of your security posture as well, and should be treated accordingly. So,
absolutely. So we talked a little bit before, and before I get to the resources that are available, here's kind of a controversial question that I've got for you to kind of finish up. And we're glad everybody, please fire some questions away. But what about paying the ransom if we're in a ransomware situation? Because, I've worked with 3-letter agencies in the past, and they were like, never, ever pay the ransom. And I feel like these days they've changed their stance a little bit on that.
Yeah. So, yes, you're actually correct, right? In the past, it was never pay the ransom. But I can guarantee you there are instances where you've literally got no choice. So there's really two camps that we're dealing with. And it's going to be the decision to pay the ransom is not an absolute decision. It's going to be based on a couple of things. Number one, the most important is, do you have copies of the data that was encrypted? Do you have up-to-date copies? That's going to be the first thing, right? But the second thing, though, which is equally important, is what is the sensitivity of the data that was potentially exfiltrated? That's also going to be key, because in ransomware negotiations, and I've been involved with a couple, the attackers will typically set the price for the ransom based on two things, right? You're going to need a decryption tool, and you want to put in place some sort of a confidentiality clause such that they don't dump your data. They promise not to dump your data out there and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, dumping the data is going to be dependent on the sensitivity of the data that they have. Part of the problem is most customers don't even know what kind of data they have. Or to make it worse, they don't even know where the data is residing. So during forensics, it makes for a nightmare, because obviously we can tell you what systems were accessed by the attackers, but if you can tell us, okay, potentially what data was on that system, it's a very tough sell at that point, because let's say the attackers got into a specific file share, and we were able to show that this is the only thing they got into, but everything in here is pretty much case file that is old and in cold storage or whatever. Then at that point, you've got a little bit of wiggle room going back and negotiate. You are always going to have to negotiate with the attackers. I can guarantee it, unless you don't have any data of value. You are good. I mean, I would say 75% of the time, most of the customers we've dealt with have had to go back and negotiate. But it's now a question of, are you negotiating from a position of strength or negotiating from a position of weakness? That's the big difference. So it's not, and again, based on what we've seen some customers that they literally had no choice. There was no, if they had no backups, nothing. They had no choice. They had to pay. On the other hand, we've got a couple of customers that were given a ransom, but then by the time they worked through forensics, restored data, yes, it was a pain, but at the end of the day, they figured, nah, anything that was touched was data that obviously it's not proprietary, it's not sensitive data that would require or trigger some sort of a notification, because that's the other thing as well, right? In this age of GDPR, that's the other thing to be concerned about. In this age of all sorts of privacy, CCPA, all sorts of privacy regulations, I mean, you really have to factor all those criteria before you come to a decision of whether we're going to pay or not. Because you're not just paying for the decryption tools. That's the mistake most people make. It's not just that. So most of the times, you're also paying for the confidentiality of the attackers, making sure that they won't dump your data out there. So that's pretty much what you're going to be dealing with for the most part.
Yeah, it's and again, this is not our stance on, hey, you should just pay the ransom. It's one of those things where we really feel strongly that it's a business decision based on how prepared you were to begin with, understanding what data was touched, understanding the level of liability that you've got related to that data being disclosed. And even sometimes if it's even accessed, there has to be some type of disclosure that has to happen or acknowledgement that has to happen. And then there's the aspect of sometimes it's not foolproof. We don't know if your backups are actually going to restore or not. So if you know and you've tested them, that's good. But even if we do pay the ransom, sometimes they're not very good at what they do, the hackers, and you can't even decrypt it anyway, which is a travesty. There's typically not a money-back guarantee there. But it's I guess the sad thing about this, and I say this all the time, there's no macaroni and cheese recipe here. I think the points that you brought up, Tunde, are perfect. It's the 80-20 rule. Let's get on the side of being better at this than not, and leveraging capabilities. We talked about a lot of capabilities that a lot of people have at their fingertips. It's just going to take a little bit of configuration and attention within the organization. And again, using a trusted advisor to come in and help them with this. I wouldn't have the expectation in an organization that somebody knows as much as kind of like folks like us know about that, just waiting for ransomware to happen. You use folks like us to kind of give you some guidance and kind of do a build model of where you should be from a program perspective. And your organization executes on that model and then can refer back to folks like a consulting team or something to be able to help you with that. That's a good model. But we'd love to say that it's easy. It's not. And to Tunde's point, you're never done. It's got to be a programmatic approach to this. Any last words, Tunde?
No, that's pretty much it. Again, it's been a great conversation. Again, if we can be of assistance to anyone, definitely feel free to reach out. But these are all things that any company can relatively implement with very little cost, leveraging existing solutions that they might have already. So that's pretty much it.
Thanks, man. And as you can see from the slide that's up, there's a lot of resources that we have available, including the white paper that Tunde was talking about that he wrote a little while ago. If you go to insightcdct.com, there's a lot of resources there for everything related to security. Thanks for your time and have a great day.
Thank you.